What we're doing here at these a few sessions is that we're trying to give you an indication of the Buddha mandala. And the reason that we're doing that is we're trying to give you some kind of framework really for practice. We're trying to give you a conceptual kind of understanding of something that's actually completely beyond understanding, beyond concepts at least. But we need, when we're meditating, when we're kind of engaged, exploring spiritual practices, ethics, wisdom, whatever it is, if we haven't got something that's in relation to, then we can just be sort of floundering around in a way. It's kind of, we get a bit from here and a bit from there, but we don't really know why we're doing these separate activities or these kind of little snippets of practice. So really, the Buddha mandala is saying this is what we're aiming for. This is actually the goal of all these fragments of practice. And unless we have this sort of bigger vision of practice, in a way, what we might end up doing is simply aiming to make ourselves a bit happier, a bit more peaceful, kind, content. All these kind of attributes, these kind of fruits, if you like, are quite reasonable to want to seek, to gain. But they're not actually the goal of Buddhist practice. So these things that we're talking about are actually just byproducts of the process of engaging in Buddhist practice, engaging in the Buddhist spiritual life. And these kind of little byproducts are really seductive. They're really kind of easy to kind of put those as your kind of goal, really. But so part of this what I'm talking tonight, or what I'm talking is that I want to kind of just remind us that these are not the goals. These are just kind of little kind of fruits, really, of practice. And but actually, what the Dharma is offering is actually far more challenging, far more radical than these kind of happiness, peace, contentment, all these things that we can talk about. So the goal of practice, of Buddhist practice, is to utterly dismantle any attachment to the fantasy of an ultimate separate selfhood. Because it's this fantasy of selfhood, of kind of separation, isolation as a kind of separate being, that's actually kind of ensnared us for lifetime upon lifetime upon lifetime. We kind of get trapped or kind of seduced by this fantasy of a separate selfhood. So the teachings of Buddhism, teachings of the Buddha, is that everything that we love, everything that we're drawn to, everything that we despise, everything that we resist is actually impermanent. Everything is insubstantial and ultimately unsatisfactory. I mean, it can be great for a short period of time, these different experiences, but then they change. This is the nature of all things conditioned. So we get satisfaction and then we lose it, and it's this endless kind of tussling, trying to kind of manoeuvre and manipulate our life in a way to make it work, which is such a trap and a kind of so exhausting. So the teachings of Buddhism are really trying to approach these truths that the Buddha kind of discovered in his own experience 2,500 years ago. He kind of saw that there was this kind of ground of impermanence, insubstantiality and unsatisfactoriness. And he kind of he took that ground and really explored, well, what happens when you kind of really allow that to be the case, to kind of really embrace that truth. And what he found was, in embracing it, the consequences of that, it completely dissolved this sense of a separate selfhood. He cut through the roots of this painful illusion that is kind of the cause of suffering. And that allowed his life force, the life force that he was embodying, to join, participate in the spontaneous and this ever-changing dance of reality. And so it's not that kind of you go into this kind of breaking of selfhood, that you just suddenly go into some empty void. You'll just become much more fluid in your being. So you can actually be creative, spontaneous, responsive. So it actually you move from this kind of restricted sense of oneself where you're trying to kind of fit and manoeuvre to a completely open and available, abundant life. So it's a very kind of, I find it a very exhilarating vision, really. The vision of the Buddha mandala is really, this mandala is this kind of explosion of light, of energy, which is kind of available once you kind of just kind of release from this kind of restricted sense of oneself. So the aim, the practice of the Dharma is really what we're trying to do is it's kind of pointing towards the means to embody these kind of wisdoms. How can we kind of live this experience? And not just for our own benefit, but the benefit of all beings. This is the kind of goal, is once we lose it, that practice is about me, my, whatever, then it puts a whole different kind of perspective on, why we sit down to meditate or why we engage in whatever practice we're doing. It kind of just broadens, opens out practice. Okay, so this Buddha mandala can be kind of quite abstract and a bit kind of theoretical. So the second reason for kind of talking about this mandala is to actually try to engage with the imagery and the symbols of the mandala. And through that we then begin to engage our imagination. Because we need the imagination for our practices to actually kind of fire our practice. If we're trying to work at practice from a rational, this is a good idea, it's not going to happen. We need that kind of deeper heart or gut level to experience to really kind of energize our practice. So the reflecting upon the contemplation of these specific forms, specific symbols, can really start to activate the imagination. So there's that kind of direction that we're kind of opening ourselves to these symbols, to this imagery through our imagination. But the other aspect of imagination, of course, is that the space of imagination allows something to enter into us. So by opening in the imagination, what we're actually doing is allowing the Buddha mandala a kind of channel into our lives. Because just as we're trying, our sense of practice is that we're trying to move towards something, or, there's this fantasy of a path or a kind of movement, there's also this kind of reality wants to kind of, or is constantly, there's this constant display of reality which we can partake in. So we're trying to open to allow that kind of display to live through us. It wants to live through us. So actually, a lot of practice is just to try to open, to relax, to let things be, so that the light, this kind of natural life, can emerge. It just makes it a lot easier, really. A lot kind of more less stressful. if we include this kind of other dimension of practice, this kind of real allowing the Buddha mandala to work or to come towards us. So if we kind of take that as an actuality that the Buddha mandala is trying to kind of manifest in life the whole time, what it means is that we can then use the imagination to recognise that we're kind of surrounded, of course, that we are surrounded by messengers, that we're surrounded by signs, indicators of this constantly unfolding reality which we can kind of participate in. So part of this engagement with practice on an imaginative level is that we can really develop a sensitivity to these gifts that are kind of all around us. So part of the implication of this imaginative engagement is to really take notice of what's happening around us, the world around us, our relationships, what's happening in our relationships. Notice where the energy is, what's kind of calling us, what is wanting to be known, what keeps kind of reappearing in front of us. You know, what is it? What is that little wave that the universe is kind of giving to us? That we keep kind of, no. So it's interesting. It's kind of to really take, that side. There is that energy that kind of wants to live. I think the other side of the imagination is to, once we start to get a sense that everything is actually comes out of imagination, we're actually creating stories the whole time. So each of us here sitting in this room have got a completely unique story about what's happening here. You're hearing what I'm saying completely uniquely. I've no idea what you're hearing. And that's how it is. So really kind of acknowledging that we are the creator and the teller of our stories, and these stories are operating to create this separate selfhood. So to really kind of get hold of that as a truth, as a reality, that we are creating our universe the whole time, it makes the whole thing much more kind of fluid, really, or potentially much more fluid, because we can start to recognise that everything that we're kind of experiencing around us and within us isn't kind of, there's not a kind of solidity to it. It's not kind of wholly true, it's not wholly false. It's a kind of fluid and ever-changing experience which can be kind of laden with meaning, with significance. And that's